Good afternoon and welcome to the ACLU of Pennsylvania's March All-Member Webinar. We're going to give folks a couple of minutes to join and we'll start soon. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday and welcome to the ACLU of Pennsylvania's All-Membership Webinar. My name is Sarah Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so fortunate to serve this affiliate and lead our development program. I want to start by thanking you all for being with us today. The work to advance civil liberties takes all of us, staff, volunteers, clients, community partners, and supporters who are dedicated to fighting for a Pennsylvania that is better for us all. So we appreciate all that you do to advance our work, and that means showing up in this space today. So thank you. One of the things that's important to us is increasing the diversity of our stakeholders, every aspect of our organization, including membership, so that it reflects not only the world that we live in, but the people that we serve. With our members, with our webinars, there is often a broad range of folks who can call in. Some of you have been supporting us for decades, and some of you are newer to our work. So we are delighted to have you all join us today. So if you are more new to your work, I encourage you to find ways to get plugged in, and we'll be sure to share ways in which you can throughout today. We'd like to take the first few minutes to provide a broad overview of our organization and the work that we do. The American Civil Liberties Union is a national, nonpartisan organization founded over 100 years ago. Here in Pennsylvania, we are roughly 40 of us with offices in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. And across the state, we have over 30,000 active members. You know, we are in the midst of a strategic plan. We're at the foundation, we work hard to incorporate authentic belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity in all facets of what we do. Our plan guides us by outlining our top 3 priority areas: decarceration, police reform, and voting rights. Although 70 to 80% of our time will be geared towards these issue areas, the rest is designed for us to remain nimble and respond to emergent threats like free speech and LGBTQIA equality. Today, I'm so excited to introduce our new executive director, Mike Lee. Mike will join us shortly to talk about his passion for the work of ACLU-PA, his history working on civil liberties, and why he was so eager to join our team. Our Director of Communications, Andy Hoover, will lead the discussion, and we'll leave some space at the end for Q&A. As an FYI, just some logistics. The webinar is recorded. We'll plan on posting it as well, so please share the knowledge and guide others in your community towards the session. If you need closed captions, you can enable that feature at the bottom of your screen under live transcript. We will be utilizing the Q&A function during the call, so please use it. And for folks who've dialed in, you can submit your questions to donate@aclupa.org. So with that, I'd like to ask Mike and Andy to join me up on stage.
Hey, Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to all of you on the webinar today for joining. My name is Andy Hoover. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Director of Communications for the ACLU of PA, and I'm looking forward to today, as it's an honor to be able to introduce our new Executive Director, Mike Lee, to members across the state. So Mike is a lifelong Philadelphian. He joins the organization after serving for 6 years in the administration of Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. Before his time with the DA's office, Mike founded and served as co-founder and executive director of Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. Pulse is a nonprofit legal aid firm that helps Pennsylvanians expunge their criminal records, a program that would later become a model for Pennsylvania's clean slate law. In Mike's early years practicing law, he specialized in criminal defense and had a number of clients who had been prosecuted during the Occupy protests. Mike began protecting 1A rights as a regular legal observer in law school, including during the G20 protests in Pittsburgh in 2009. But like all of us, Mike is so much more than this bio, and you'll get to see this firsthand. So today, Mike and I will have a conversation, and with about 10 minutes left, we'll open up the floor to your questions. As Sarah mentioned, you can use the Q&A function in the Zoom, or if you are on by phone, you can also email us at donate@aclupa.org with any questions. So make use of that if you have questions for Mike. So having said all of that, let's get started. Welcome, Mike.
Hey Andy, what's going on?
Oh, just rolling on here in 2024. Speaking of 2024, that you just started 2 months ago. You celebrated your first day in the office on January 16th, and I heard there was some intentionality behind that start date. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I sure can. And let me just also practice some of my ACLU language. Mike Lee, my pronouns are he, him, his. And it is a tremendous honor, and I'm terribly excited to be here and share the stage with you, Andy, but more importantly, to be part of the ACLU Pennsylvania family in my newest role. Happy Women's History Month to everybody, and also a somber remembrance of International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and the Sharpeville massacres in South Africa that led to the intentionality of the United Nations bringing more attention to the negative impacts of racial discrimination. But Andy, you did say I started intentionally on January 16th. That was for two reasons. The first and most important reason is I welcomed a baby girl to our family at the end of November and took my full parental leave before taking a few weeks off to just prepare myself for this wonderful journey. And when I was going through the interview process and doing the math, and at that time, my daughter hadn't even been born yet, I was thinking to myself, MLK Day would be an awesome way to start my time as executive director for the ACLU. And I always found it curious that MLK Day, we talk so much about the contributions of African Americans to the integrity and living up to the standards that we lay forth in the Constitution. And then we don't talk about them again until Black History Month, 2 weeks later. And then we have 28 or 29 days. So a few years back, I made MLK Day my unofficial start to Black History Month. So if anyone asks, I definitely started my tenure in the ACLU during Black History Month.
So, Mike, I mentioned a few things from your bio, but I wanted to give you a chance to say a little more. If anybody just happened to be joining and missed that part, or you want to expand a little bit on that, so tell us a little more about your background.
Sure. As you said, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. Those familiar, I grew up in the northwest section in a little neighborhood called Mount Airy, known for its diversity and inclusion. So, in a lot of ways, I've been very fortunate to have experienced a lot of different types of diversity throughout my life. That somewhat continued throughout my academic career. I'm a proud graduate of Central High School 259 for any Philadelphians in the ACLU family. And I spent 1 year at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, trying to follow in the footsteps of Dr. King. Morehouse College wasn't for me, or a better way that I like to describe it is I went there to learn how to be a man. And instead of taking 4 years, it actually only took 1 year and a couple interactions with police. I transferred from Morehouse College to George Washington University. And my first day of class was 9/11. And I was in DC, both learning more about myself in adulthood while also seeing for the first time in my life a real mass movement against what the government was trying to do at that point was what we now know as the illegal war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And all throughout this time, I never thought of myself as being a lawyer or really wanted to go to law school. My father is a lawyer, so I'm a second generation African American Pennsylvania lawyer, which is a rarity, unfortunately, to this day. But seeing the hours he worked and the stress and strain that it put on him, although it provided things for our family, it wasn't necessarily how I thought I would be most helpful. Um, my mother was a public school teacher and was the type of teacher that taught inside and outside the classroom. Very big on mentorship, both my parents were, and having people come to them not just with their particular problems in school or a young attorney trying to think through legal strategy, but also just came for life advice and guidance. And ultimately, I decided to go to law school after being really annoyed and frustrated with how Hurricane Katrina was being portrayed in the news. It really woke up a different kind of social consciousness in me. And I quickly applied to law school, decided to go to Drexel Law School as part of their inaugural class, and was very fortunate to be in a position to start my legal career with a lot of opportunities created by the financial crisis and just the wonderful support network that I built up over the years.
So I understand when you were at Drexel, you started an ACLU chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well as your connections to the ACLU?
Sure. And when you're at a part of a first class of a university or school, very easy to start things, but the measurement is how long does it go when you leave? And for me, being part of the inaugural class of Drexel Law School was a tremendous opportunity. One of the reasons I didn't really want to go to law school is I don't like old dead people on the wall, and law schools are full of portraits of those who've come before us. And I always kind of look side-eyed, like, I wonder what side of arguments this person is hung up on the wall for. But at Drexel, there were no alumni to hang on the wall, and there was a very willingness on the administration's part to help students explore their interests and ideas. Myself and a few other progressive law students, 3 people and a faculty advisor is all it took to start the ACLU chapter and get me on the road to doing things like legal observing for different activities in and around Philadelphia. After I graduated law school and started my legal aid organization, I was invited to a table for nonprofit leaders around Philadelphia. And that's where I first met my predecessor, Reggie Shuford. We were the only 2 African American men in the room. And when we locked eyes, I then got up and changed my seat to sit next to him to just say, like, obviously we're going to be friends. And we certainly were. And Reggie was very supportive of what I was trying to do with my nonprofit, and also very supportive of me when I transitioned to work for the government. And all throughout the time, the ACLU has just kind of been sometimes a silent partner in protecting my rights, right? But also a very public and upfront partner in collaborating with me to bring more attention to the need to change criminal records, and also just to guarantee and protect First Amendment rights when I was doing more of that in criminal defense.
So, Mike, you are now at the beginning of your third month on the job. How have the first couple of months been for you, and how have you been spending your time?
First couple of months have been awesome, Andy. At least for me. I hope they've been awesome for everybody else. My onboarding first has just been phenomenal. So I really want to thank everyone who put all the effort and energy into putting together briefing packets of this is everything my department is up to. These are things that are going well. This is what we could use help with. I'd also just like to commend very specifically Claire Landau, who served very nobly as the interim executive director and really keeping things heading in the right direction that made my first month allow me to be just as curious and generous as I wanted with my time and questions. I've been able to make it to all three offices in the first 30 days. It was my second trip to Pittsburgh. First time where I actually walked around during the day and there weren't militarized trucks and things like that, like in G20. And it's just been a wonderful opportunity to meet all of the different staff members, most of them face to face, meet board members and people who really are the shoulders that I stand upon, and engage a lot of people who are very curious as to what direction the ACLU of Pennsylvania is going to go to moving forward. And it's just been, every day a new exciting thing for me.
So, by the way, I want to remind everybody who's on the webinar that you can submit questions through the Q&A function as well as by email via donate@aclupa.org. Mike, I understand that you embrace the 3 Ds of organizational health. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Andy. And I talk about it all the time. And I think it is a very important way to help organize and understand how I try to approach organizational health, which is one of my biggest responsibilities as executive director. The 3 Ds are dynamics, decision making, and development. And I'll break each one of those down for you. First and foremost are the dynamics, how we interact with each other, making sure that we have a healthy workspace where people feel comfortable raising different opinions and perspectives. We can have conversations about things and you can be heard without the outcome being we do everything you said do. And you can be respected with the outcome being we do everything you recommend doing, right? There's lots of different ways in which our dynamics play out. And it's very important that things like our Abide Committee, which is authentic belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity, that committee really focuses in on our interpersonal dynamics and how we as an organization can make sure that we are identifying harm we may create intentionally or unintentionally, addressing and repairing that harm, and moving forward, knowing that our intentions are pure and that we're all entering this space with open minds and hearts. And that's really important in the type of work that we do, where we're so constantly under attack for speaking out against injustices. The second D is decision making. Most outcomes of our decisions we can't control, right? But what we can control is how we arrive at our decision, the strategy behind why we're going to do something, and creating the buy-in and communication among people who have to do something or could be impacted by our decision so that they understand what's happening. And for me, decision making, of course, happens at all different levels within an organization. And one of the ways you can measure organizational health is how consistent is the decision-making process. And sometimes we have a tendency to start with an outcome. I want to speak out against this, and then we reverse engineer our decision-making to get us to the outcome that we wanted to do. So I really try to take a step back and make sure that regardless of what the outcomes are, did we follow the proper decision-making process and structure? And there, if we did, I can defend whatever the outcome is, whether it's the ACLU representing a group that whose speech we don't agree with. but according to our decision-making transparent process, we believe First Amendment rights supersede our displeasure with what was said. That decision making is very helpful and important. And the last D is development. And a lot of people don't think about development when they're thinking about social justice work or bringing about the change we want to see. But as someone who started a legal aid organization with no money, right? I understand the importance of development as a way to help us achieve our goals. And if our development isn't highlighting our healthy dynamics, our healthy decision making, and the outcomes that we like, then we won't have the resources we need to continue. And it's a lot more stressful of a work environment when you have the uncertainty of, will I have a job in a year or 2 years? So it really is a reflection of our forward thinking and stability. Sarah mentioned the fact that we're in the midst of a strategic plan. We also are in the midst of transitioning from an annual budget to a 3-year budget to again provide more stability and predictability to how we do things. And I think that when you have a way to talk about your dynamics, when you have a way to talk about your decision making, and when you see stability through development, then you have a workspace that opens up for safety and curiosity and creativity, most importantly. And those are the things that I try to provide as executive director.
So I know we're talking about organizational issues and internal administrative topics. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the work here in a moment, but I think it really speaks to just how critical the executive director role is, obviously, but also just like the whole, everything you're describing is just so important for our mission of advocating for civil liberties. Like the lawsuits and the lobbying and the grassroots work, that's all, like, that's the stuff that gets people energized, but you can't do it without everything you're describing when it comes to organizational function. Now I'm going to ask you another well, it is an administrative related issue, but or topic. There's a joke around here. I don't know if you've heard this one yet, Mike, but if you agree with 90% of what the ACLU does, you should be a member. If you agree with 50% of what the ACLU does, you should be on our board. So I know you just had your first board meeting. Any thoughts about your first board meeting and meeting the board for the first time?
Oh, yeah. Well, my first interactions with the board were actually with the hiring process. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, why did you choose the ACLU? And now I'm starting to tell people, like, wait, the board and the ACLU are the ones that went through this nationwide search. I was one of the applicants, very happy to come out on top. And I think that um, again, their dynamics, decision making, and development that went into even the job search for executive director shows their maturity as a board, and the stability and guidance that they provide. So having that as a appetizer into these relationships has been really rewarding. At the first board meeting, which was in Philadelphia, almost everyone was able to attend. One new more board member was in Europe, but outside of that, people from all over the state, as far away as Erie and as close as down the street in Philly, all came together and had just been really supportive and welcoming of me. And that's something that I keep at the front of my mind, is that as executive director, I'm the representative for their beliefs in this organization. And if it wasn't for the commitment of the board and the board members, there would be no ACLU of Pennsylvania. There would be no larger ACLU. And it's really important to me to lift up the importance of the volunteer board and how much of a time commitment goes into the board governance and the emerging relationship that I'm having with the different board members. Again, I think shows a maturity for the organization and affiliate that I only want to strengthen over time. I'm looking forward to having more interactions with board members, some one-on-one conversations and coffees, get to know people, find what they're interested in, and the last thing I'll say is our next board meeting is virtual, but the one after that, I'm going to try to get a little bit better catering just because I want a few better options than just some lunch meat sandwiches and things like that. So I do have a small ED stipend, so I might do some team building with a little more nutritious food for the board so we keep our energy up while we make decisions.
Okay. You always give some of the management team the option of attending in person. So based on what you just said, I may be attending the September one in person and not on Zoom. So now that you've been in what a little over 2 months, 2 months and 5 days, what's top of mind right now? What are you thinking about in terms of any reflections, any goals, anything you want to share?
Yeah, well, it's been about 43 work days. We've had 2 snow days and a couple of weekends. And I'm actually gearing up for another trip out to Pittsburgh next week. So I'm very excited to get to meet a few more of our Western Pennsylvania supporters. Um, and I would say that I'm just going to keep this excitement going. We are a battleground state. I don't know if you heard that. But people think that Pennsylvania could be somewhat pivotal in the shape of democracy and direction of the country and the future of the world or planet.
People are
So
saying
it is,
that, Mike. People are saying
yeah,
that.
it's a little scary, because I'm like, Andy, I don't know where to find this file, but also I'm getting emails to jump right into the middle of issues and controversies that have been years in the making. So um, I really just try to focus in on being the best version of myself, which I would describe as when I'm generous with my time and curious with my questions. And right now, I think there's a lot of um, society as a whole is asking organizations to do more, whether it be private corporations, what is their level of giving, what is their issue on this. We see it a lot more in sports where you're either told to shut up or dribble, or you're asked to run for vice president, depending on what your position is, maybe in sports, but maybe also your actual political positions. And the ACLU as a whole is also being asked internally and externally, what will our work look like in the future? How can we take a more critical view of what we do and how we make our decisions? And I'm very excited to be a part of that decision making and conversation while also dealing with all the different challenges that we're facing today. I really do believe that two things. One, we've gone through similar things before as a country, and I believe every generation is right in saying this is the worst our country has ever felt. And also, the second thing is true: we respond, right? And at the end of the day, um, hateful ideas are less popular. And to paraphrase Dr. King, and one of the metaphors I really like about the ACLU and the background of Lady Liberty's torch for me is we are that flame, right? And as Dr. King says, darkness can't drive out darkness, only light can do that. And the more we confront the darkness of trying to erode our democratic values, trying to devalue elections, trying to marginalize people who've worked for many generations to reach that equal status as citizens as provided for in our founding legal documents, we need to continue to be that light and shine out the darkness. And one of my favorite examples of that is what we did in Lebanon County. You want me to tell you what we did in Lebanon County, Andy?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. In Lebanon County, in the absence of public, so the darkness of secrecy, the county commissioners decided to go from one drop box to zero. And I didn't know before that having a drop box was not a legal requirement in Pennsylvania. It was a little more discretionary county to county, but they decided to go from one to zero without having a public vote. our integrated advocacy voting rights team sent a letter saying, hey, you probably violated the Sunshine Act, do this vote over. And at the same time, our advocacy and policy team mobilized people impacted by this in Lebanon County. So when they got to the public meeting to try to go from one Dropbox to zero, they heard from the light. And they didn't quite see the light that time. They had to have a third public meeting before they finally saw the light and realized that people like drop boxes. People like having their vote counted. And when you take away things that make it easier for people to vote, you're only going to undermine the participation of people that you say you care about, which are your constituents or your friends and neighbors. So I think that's a really good example of bringing light to the darkness and having a direct impact in a part of the state that people might not think we would have the ability to make an impact, and an example of how the ACLU's unique organizational structure of being able to put out with your comms department a lot of social media, lifting up all of the engagement that we were doing with all the different impacted people to say, hey, look at what's happening in Lebanon County. Y'all better not do that either, because we might be able to reach you. I really think that is a great example of the impact of our work and how the ACLU of Pennsylvania works together to effectuate this change.
Yeah, I want to say a little more about that too, because it was a really a great mobilization effort on our colleagues' part as well as partner organizations. I do just want to remind folks that you can use the Q&A function for questions. I see a few in there, and we'll get to those in a few minutes, as well as email to donate@aclu-pa.org, donate@aclu-pa.org, or use the Q&A function. Yeah, the Lebanon situation. If they had not messed up on the Sunshine Act, by messing up on the Sunshine Act, that actually gave us an opportunity to mobilize. And for folks who aren't familiar with the area in South Central Pennsylvania, Lebanon is a pretty small county. It is east of Harrisburg and north of Lancaster. But there were concerned citizens who came out once there actually was a public discussion, as you said, and this really involved numerous organizations besides ours, and there are several worth shouting out. Disability Rights Pennsylvania, the drop boxes are in mail with mail ballots are really critical for people with disabilities. CASA, which is an immigrants' rights group based in Southern Pennsylvania. They were active. The local NAACP chapter, the League of Women Voters, New Pennsylvania Project. And I say all of that because, one, to give our allies credit, and two, it really speaks to how ACLU-PA is connected in a network of organizations that are doing everything we can to protect people's right to vote. And that's going to be a big part of the work here in 2024. I should mention that our newest mobilization, we have another problem county, Westmoreland in Western Pennsylvania. They just voted to eliminate their one drop box. They've had a single drop box throughout since mail balloting started. And they claimed that use of it had dropped in the last couple of elections. Well, of course it did, because turnout tends to drop in municipal and judicial years as well as non-presidential years. So we are actively encouraging people in Westmoreland County to contact their county commissioners to bring back that drop box. Meanwhile, there are some success stories. Allegheny County, Dauphin County, that both recently have announced expansions to drop boxes for mail ballots. That's a good next or segue into just thinking a little more about 2024 and talking about it, Mike. What is top of mind for you right now, besides what we just discussed, mobilization and on in Lebanon and elsewhere? When it comes to the work itself and the issues, what are you thinking about right now as top priorities for us?
Cool. And in my role as executive director, two of my responsibilities are talking publicly about all the great work that all of my team members are doing, like I just did, and also making sure that we are addressing and talking about some of our internal work as well. So before I transition back out to some of our outward facing work, I just wanted to touch on one more inward facing thing and something that I'm excited about. And I'm probably excited about everything, Andy. So we'll have to work on other adjectives for me to describe my state. Uh, we have all staff retreat coming up in about 2 months. And one of the focuses of this all staff retreat, again, is dynamics, unintentional interpersonal harms. So I said or did something where I did not intend to create harm with another colleague, but I did. And how do we talk through that? How is that harm acknowledged where it isn't creating more harm? And most importantly, what can we do to repair the harm and be able to move forward in a safe and productive way? That's something that you have to be really deliberate about and make sure that you dedicate time as an organization to. Another reason I was attracted to ACLU Pennsylvania is this isn't new, right? At the all staff retreat last year, there was a great focus on abide and the importance of understanding interpersonal harms and how to move forward. In the strategic plan, there's a discussion that's 3 years ago about the importance of addressing interpersonal harms and how we move forward. We will also be adding to the all staff retreat this year something that I call unintentional organizational harm, which is when our organization takes a position that is different or causes controversy and tension with some of our staff or some of our supporters. How are we able to talk through and work through those issues? And I think it is important to acknowledge publicly, one, I, as the executive director, Mike Lee, I will be in charge of an organization that creates unintentional harm. That is just something that will happen. But I also will commit myself publicly that when it does occur and is brought to my attention, I will own it and do what I need to do to repair and move forward. And hopefully, after this all staff retreat, I'll have more of the tools necessary to be able to do that in a way that is respectful of the harmed people or person, as well as my values and the values of the ACLU of Pennsylvania. But from a work perspective, what do I want to do for 2024?
Yeah, let us hear it.
Well, funny you should ask that, Andy, because I've been spending the last 60 some nights thinking about what can we do over the next year. And every time I turn on the TV or radio, or I guess log on to the internet, it's the election. And there's just so many competing narratives around what the election means. And something I keep going back to, it doesn't matter who wins the election for presidency. We have a Supreme Court that seems to be fairly hostile to civil liberties and is perfectly comfortable with a judicial retreat from a lot of the advancements that people have sacrificed lives and times for. So we need to make sure people vote and understand what voting means, and make sure that they know how their county operates and their elections. And that was something that was a little bit surprising to me to know, is that there's not a standardized way mail-in ballots are cured across Pennsylvania. There's not a standardized way people who have something that needs to be cured are notified across the Commonwealth. And there's not a standard way across the Commonwealth for people to even know that their vote was counted or canceled. We're awaiting a decision. Go ahead, bro.
And I was going to say, and just to be clear on what we're talking about when we talk about curing a ballot, that basically means that if you submitted your mail ballot and the election officials can see there's some error, like you didn't sign it, you didn't date it. Some counties actually weigh the envelope, so they know if you use the secrecy envelope. That's what we're talking about, the opportunity to fix an error that could lead to your ballot not counting.
Right. You're in error leading to your ballot not counting, which is crazy, right? Like the government should be there to make sure every ballot is counted. And it's very important that we keep that part of the conversation front and center, is that the government's obligation to make sure our voices are heard. And a lot of the Voting Rights Act is designed to make sure government can't isolate and marginalize people by making it harder or impossible to vote. And here we are, generations later, confronting many of the same battles, but we also have examples of how to overcome these challenges and barriers. And one thing we're doing around this is our volunteers, right? We have a huge volunteer engagement that we're lifting up through our advocacy program. You can go to ACLU-PA.org /EN for English /volunteer and interns to see more about our volunteer academy and ways that you can get trained to do something like be a county canvasser. So what a county canvasser is, and this was front and center in Philadelphia after the last presidential election, while the county officials were counting ballots to see what the outcome was, there were people going around watching. Some of those individuals were affiliated with a partisan political group like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, but there's also an ability for non-affiliated people to observe the count as well. And we want to make sure that people who are interested in getting that skill set and having that opportunity are trained to do so, and counties understand that these individuals are allowed to observe the counts as they're occurring. And I encourage everyone to go to our website to see more about that.
And Mike, related to that, even before election day, right now we have volunteers participating in a project called the Transparency Project, where so many, and we've been kind of talking about this, or at least alluding to it here the last couple minutes, how so many election related policy decisions are made at the county level. And so we have volunteers who are involved in this project of keeping an eye on their local county and what's being discussed at boards of election meetings. So like we talked about Lebanon, we talked about Westmoreland. Knowing what's happening at the county level is really, really important, because there are 67 counties out there, and each of those boards meets on a regular basis. And so it's helpful for us to have volunteers keeping an eye on each county. I should mention, I know we're not officially in the Q&A yet, but since something you just said reminded me of a question that's in the Q&A about cases related to election integrity. We've been talking about these errors in mail balloting. We actually have an active case right now at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, NAACP v. Schmidt. And this is a case challenging the disqualification of mail ballots that have no handwritten date or an incorrect handwritten date on the return envelope. So these are eligible voters. They are ballots that are received on time, but they didn't have or had the wrong date handwritten on the return envelope. We're arguing that the Federal Civil Rights Act guarantees that those ballots are counted. We won that case at the district level, and now we're waiting for a decision from the appeals court. As well, related to that, in York County, we just recently filed a lawsuit to your point about canvassers. In the fall 2023 election, we had several volunteers out around the state observing the canvass, and in York they refused to let our volunteer enter. So we did follow that lawsuit as well. So thanks to the person in the chat in the Q&A who asked that question. I want to be sure to highlight both of those cases.
Thank you for filling that in, Andy. And two other things that I'm really focused in on in 2024 and a little bit of 25. Uh, as you said earlier, a lot of my background is in um, public safety specific and public health, specifically around our criminal legal system. The legal aid organization I started, Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, I was really focused on changing the narrative around criminal records. And what I mean by that is I met too many people who would say, my record's holding me back. And I say, if it's your record, why can't you just delete it? It's not your record, it's the government's record of how it treated you in the criminal legal system. This police agency arrested you. This prosecutor prosecuted you. This judge found you guilty or not guilty. So, no part about this is your record of action. It's a record of government actions. And through the expungement process, it was an affirmative time to say, hey, government, you did this, so now you take it away, what is eligible. And then advocated through a lot of grassroots and impacted people to add to the list of what can be taken away. Then I went into the district attorney's office, and it took a lot of reconciliation for me to feel like I could be a prosecutor and work in a prosecutor's office. It helped that I was part of the campaign that got the DA elected. So I agree with the platform of there's too many people incarcerated for the wrong reasons. There's too many innocent people incarcerated. There's too many guilty people not being arrested. There's victims that don't feel like they're being heard. And what can we do as government to fix that? And it was a real trip being part of the government because that's usually what I'm railing against. And almost every day I had to wake up and tell myself, I am a government employee. When people say the government didn't, they're talking about me too. When I say the city didn't, I'm talking about myself too. And I take all of those experiences and interactions with me into this work and back into that activist space. And I'm really excited, see, there's that word again, to line up some of my expertise around problem solving courts, substance use disorder, the terrible consequences of the war on drugs, more particularly the criminalization of cannabis, and police accountability. And working in one of the prosecutor offices, trying to hold police accountable for misconduct and all of the challenges that go into that. So I'm really looking forward to kind of plugging myself and my expertise into our work around decarceration, lowering the number of people of supervision, and holding more police accountable for violating people's rights.
Yeah, I don't know if you, I didn't catch if you said it directly, but I'll just reiterate the things you just talked about are priority issues in our current strategic plan, which are voting rights, decarceration, and policing. But we wrote that strategic plan in a way that gives us some space for emerging issues. So we spend 70% or so of our time on those three priorities, but also we have other issues. And frankly, when our members see our next newsletter, you're going to see a lot about education because civil liberties struggles seem to be happening at the school board level right now. And so that became an emerging issue in the midst of our current strategic plan. It's something we're working on. To that point, and 1:20 is the official Q&A time. It's 1:19. Why don't we just jump into it? There are two First Amendment related questions in the Q&A, and one of them is about schools. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm not a lawyer, but you are. But I know you're also getting up to speed on some of the things we've been working on. There are two questions about the First Amendment. One is, what do you say to school board members who claim that the First Amendment does not guarantee the separation of church and state, and then they implement some form of public prayer? Do you want to answer that?
I mean, I'm brushing up on my establishment clause, but generally speaking, I would first say go to our website. We have a wealth of information there that is a little more reasoned. Actually, one of my problems with the bar exam is I would never hire a lawyer who just I ask a question and they're like, let me think about that and just give you the answer without being like, let me go look this up. So in a true legal fashion, I do not believe the prayer can be mandated. It could be voluntary, but again, I would encourage someone to go to our website. And if you do believe that the First Amendment is being violated and there is the endorsement of a religion in a public school, then you should go to our website and fill out an intake form, and someone will follow up with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the intake. And Kelly, thank you for that question. If you're asking it, maybe there's a chance that you're actually dealing with this issue. If someone wants to file a complaint with us on this issue or any other, you can go to aclupa.org/intake. And we have an online form that you can fill out to talk about or to give us the information about the situation you're dealing with. I do think it's worth mentioning we did have a recent First Amendment Establishment Clause case out of Lehigh Valley, Northampton County, related to a student club for the Satanic Temple, which is not actually it's not an organization that literally worships Satan, but it is a benevolent organization that espouses empathy and care for the world around you. And we took on, and the club was being denied access to space at the public school, and we took them on and won that case. So that was a success. I know that we have another situation that I don't believe is public yet, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, but a local government that is not doing the right thing on these issues. And we're looking into that right now. I do want to get to this other comment about the First Amendment from Rich. Rich he doesn't ask a question directly, but it's a comment about noting that he appreciates the work that we're doing on all these issues, including voting in the election. Also saying that at the same time, it seems as if core issues like First Amendment rights, free speech, and assembly can get lost in the shuffle. And those issues are the ones where there really aren't other advocacy groups to take up the slack. I'm hoping you will take a look and make sure our most basic rights remain top of mind. So Mike, having heard that, the ACLU is famous, has made a history of defending the right to free speech. I want to give you a chance just to reflect a little bit about free speech rights and their role at the ACLU.
Sure. And Rich, you are in luck because we just talked about this as a staff about an hour and a half ago about the need to make sure that we are being mindful of free speech and First Amendment issues across Pennsylvania, especially in light of all the conversations around the events unfolding in Palestine. So we are always on the lookout for First Amendment violations and free speech violations. And just because we're not lifting it up as much as we're doing other work doesn't mean the work isn't being done. I know we have screened multiple cases in the last 3 weeks or so related to some school accusations of schools suppressing speech in various ways. And we just haven't quite found one that has the facts that would necessitate us to join in. But just because we talk about our work in terms of priority areas doesn't mean it's at the expense of our commitment to free speech and First Amendment rights. So even within the umbrella of our priorities, we're constantly looking for ways in which we could create good case law for First Amendment issues, as well as just depend on what comes on through the intake. So the issues that we're aware of are some of the issues that we advocate for. And the last thing I said is I believe we're also preparing some advocacy tools like know your rights trainings and things like that for educators and people who may want to speak out more publicly, but are afraid that they could face retaliation for their speech.
And I also want to flag that we do have an ongoing challenge against the city of Harrisburg. They have an ordinance that puts an excessive amount of burden on organizations that tried to organize gatherings in the city. And obviously, with the city being the state capital, it really is attractive to organizations to be there and to make their case. And so we have that active litigation as well. So folks should check that out. That's Better Path Coalition versus the city of Harrisburg. I do want to get to one or two more questions. Here's one, Mike. Have there been any surprises stepping into your role as executive director?
Yeah, step in a surprise every day. I would say one of the biggest surprises is uh, even now when I meet somebody in the ACLU family, whether it be the Pennsylvania affiliate or national, there is a welcome to the ACLU family. And people actually mean that when they say welcome to the family. And it's just been a very warm welcome. Another thing that surprised me is just how few people do all this work. And I always thought of the ACLU Pennsylvania being a much larger organization in terms of people because of the impact that it's made. And the last biggest surprise for me is Andy, I think you have a wonderful voice on podcast and it's even better in person. So I was very surprised that that silky smooth style came through in real time as it does in analog.
Thanks. I appreciate that. That may be a good opportunity to note that if you joined us late or you have a friend who you'd like to have hear this conversation, we are going to be reposting this soon as a podcast. And we're going to be starting a new series of podcast episodes here this spring. So go to the various podcast apps. The podcast is called Speaking Freely with the ACLU of Pennsylvania. Check it out. And this discussion, as well as some others we have in the works, will be in that feed. So, all right, we're coming up toward the hour mark. It's 1:27. So this sounds like a good question to cap off the discussion, Mike. What do you do for self-care? And while you're thinking about that, I don't know if following the Philadelphia 76ers at the moment qualifies as self-care. As a fellow Sixers fan, it's a little stressful.
I've actually been self-caring away from the Sixers without Joel Embiid the last month or so. But that is one of the things I do. I torture my eyes by watching Sixers basketball. Um, Another thing that I like to do is get my steps in. And I go for probably a good 30 to 45-minute walk almost every day, whether I'm in the office or at home. Try to do it before lunch as just a nice way to unwind and clear out. Home health care includes mainly just appreciating my kids for being kids. I have a 6.5-year-old and a 4-month-old, which give me two different ways to kind of lose myself in their innocence or just get fully involved in some playing with them. And my only concern is really why oh goodness, all of his toys names and I can't think of one. But basically why the Ice Wing Dragon always beats the Skywing Dragon that I have to play. For you
Well, that's
Wings
a
of
full.
Fire,
What's that?
for you Wings of Fire fans.
Well, that is a full life, Mike, and I appreciate you sharing so much, both personally and professionally, in this discussion. I want to thank everybody for the great questions you offered, really interesting topics, and appreciate everybody listening and for your attendance. Huge thank you to our colleague, Jackie Rosen, for keeping us all organized and running the tech behind the scenes. Our development team does a great job with these all-member webinars. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are able to consider a gift, please visit aclupa.org/donate to make a donation, aclupa.org/donate. Check out the various ways to get involved. Also, just want to put in one more shout out for or plug for aclupa.org/volunteer. That's the website that or the webpage you can go to on our website and get involved as a volunteer with the ACLU of Pennsylvania. So having said all that, Thank you all again. We will end the call for today. Be well.
Thank you, Andy.